So planetary imaging seems to be so much harder than deep sky for a lot of people, and I think there's multiple reasons that go into that. Reason number one is focal length, and this is because you have to actually zoom really far on the planets in order to see any details. So unlike, like a whirlpool galaxy, like you have to still zoom for that, but nowhere near as much as you're zooming for like Mars. So Mars, for example, you'd usually have to get the 2,500 millimeters in focal length, and whirlpool, I only have to go up to like 1,000, if that, maybe, just to get a decent frame rate, depending on what camera I'm using, obviously. But in terms of deep sky, usually you want a full field, like a field of stars, and maybe the galaxy a little bit smaller in the field. Whereas planets, you want to blow them up as much as possible to what your telescope and camera combination can handle. And the main issue with this is that when you zoom it in more, you can actually see atmospheric turbulence, otherwise known as seeing in planetary imaging. You can actually see it very well, and because we're recording video, it really stands out, especially because we're doing it at high frame rates. Whereas in deep sky, we're actually just taking really long exposures, so it's 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever, so it seems like it's actually sharper than like a planetary image, as long as your image ain't trailing anyway. And generally in most locations, seeing isn't always excellent, and it's very hard to find those nights, especially if you don't have a big telescope. It's really going to look crappy. Even if you do have a big telescope on bad seeing nights, like, you're still gonna struggle because the focal length, you're still zooming in more, so you're gonna really struggle with, like, actually, even though you're collecting light, you're still not collecting great light. Basically unusable light data because of how bad the seeing would be. Another reason planetary imaging is really hard is because of focus. Like, when you're doing deep sky, you don't have to actually focus precisely the same way you do with planetary imaging. Like, you don't have to spend as much time focusing, but some people don't realize this. You have to actually really look at the planet because it's hard to focus a planet, especially when you're that zoomed in, as I said, because of the seeing, of course. But when you're really zoomed in, if you want to focus it, it's recommended to use like an autofocuser. Even a bad signal might not do well. But definitely try to make sure your focus is good in planetary imaging. I know I've said this in other videos, but the point of this video is that it's very hard compared to deep sky because of these factors. Number 3 is the lack of tutorials on planetary imaging, and the reason why we're lacking a lot of tutorials is because it's still hard in itself to get good focus, and the equipment can be super expensive to buy for planetary imaging. Like, most people think you might need an 11-inch at least to get a great planetary photo, which this isn't really the case as long as your seeing is good and your focus is good and your collimation is good. But you definitely still need to invest some sort of money into planetary imaging in order to get a decent close-up high resolution photo. And you still can increase the resolution in like a smaller telescope, but it's not going to be as easy to do that, especially if the seeing is not great. But yeah, there isn't very many planetary tutorials out there, and also there's only 7 planets to photograph, so some people might find deep sky more interesting because there's more objects available to photograph at all times of the year, whereas planetary, you kind of have to wait for them to come around and stuff, so it's, hit or miss, especially because of the seeing. But yeah, planetary imaging can seem pretty difficult to do at first, so if you want to check out more on how to actually do planetary imaging, I'll link the video right here. Oh, by the way, my name is Asher, and I do astrophotography on this channel, so if you like that kind of content, make sure to subscribe. Anyways, until next time, clear skies.